Welcome to the RJLT Economics. In this podcast, I want to broadly discuss how events that began to unfold in 2022 are going to affect this year, 2023, and the years ahead. Today is the 1st of January, 2023. I've been meaning to make a similar recording for a few weeks, but I've been lazy. Haven't had the initiative to make a recording. But today I thought perhaps let me just go ahead and do one. As usual, this is not going to be highly structured, but nevertheless, I have three areas that I want to discuss, to touch on. First is on the military front, because we do have an armed conflict on a international level that is still ongoing. Secondly, I want to talk about the economic conflict, economic war, and the recession that we're experiencing. Thirdly, I want to talk about the split of globalized world, split from globalization. So let's start with the first one. Make no mistake, the war in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, currently it's mostly contained in Ukraine, is a very dangerous one. It in the beginning, in the first few days and hours of the war, I think there were a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot of people had made some wild predictions, and it seems that none of those predictions have really turned out to be so accurate. The fact is that there is some sort of they almost call it a phony war going on there. The lines are not really moving, but you could say that perhaps the casualties remained somewhat not so high, but with the war, with the conflict ongoing like this, escalations can take place by one side unitarily, or by both sides, or perhaps by a third party entering the conflict. There are a lot of variables that we cannot predict, but one thing that I think people should really be mindful of is that as long as the war continues, there will be economic strain not just on Europe and Ukraine, but also on Russia and on Central Asia, and there is a destabilizing effect in the entire region, in Eastern Europe and in the Caucasus. So we could expect more smaller scale conflicts to pop up in the Caucasus, perhaps in Central Asia, and perhaps also again in the Middle East. That is something that we should should pay some attention to. I think the military situation, on the other hand, on the Western Pacific region is more stable. With the change of government in Australia, I think the Labour government with Albanese, they are still decidedly pro-American, and that is nothing. There is nothing wrong there, but they are less belligerent, less foolhardy compared to the Morrison government. That really had, I think, has cooled things down just a notch. And I think the Chinese government really do not want any armed conflict in the region. So I think they will swallow their pride and in order to avoid a war. And make no mistakes, I don't think the Americans themselves want to engage in any armed conflict. And since there is no proper proxy and there is no willing counterparty, I think in 2023, the Pacific will be mostly peaceful. There will not be a conflict, and the hot spot of conflict remains in Eastern Europe. That's on the military front. But when we talk about the economic war, I think it's really heating up. I think there are a lot of foreign companies who are divesting from China, and they are moving their productions away from China, and they are limiting their technological exchange in China. So these movements will continue, and part of it, mostly, this is led by the policies of the American government at the moment. But I think it is not always the fact that the politicians in the U.S. This is not the first time in history that they wanted to push for something similar. But before, there were more pushbacks, and companies were less willing to listen to the government, and they would make their corporate decisions, their strategic decisions, based more on their vision of the economic landscape, global economic landscape, the economic development and policy in this region as well. But currently, it appears that their vision of what is to come, policy-wise and macroeconomic-wise in this region, coincides with the policy, the political and the economic policy of the U.S. government. In other words, it is to say that there is going to be more split, there is going to be more barriers, there is going to be more currency risks, and all these compound make them want to spread their bets. Does not mean that they want to exit China completely, but it certainly means that they need to no longer put all their eggs in one basket. I think this is something that I would certainly agree with, because perhaps they're not necessarily willingly promoting something like this, but given that the situation is as such, and that the direction in which things are moving cannot be changed, not certainly by a company of however large they are, they need to adapt to this more complex business environment. That means that China remains an important market and an important source of place of manufacturing, but it cannot be the sole supplier of critical components, and there are risks that must be mitigated by spreading the investment across the region, and perhaps extract some of the investment back to the Americas. So if I'm an American company, I will do that. But at the same time, we also must be mindful of the ongoing economic difficulties of recession. Part of it, we can indeed blame the disruptions of the virus. But at the same time, it is also the end of an economic cycle, of a big debt cycle. And this debt cycle began decades ago. And with the debt expansion, now it's going to be a contraction of debt. And that always means slower economic growth. And with slower economic growth, and given that currently we have still a fast-growing global population, that's going to be these two contradicting factors are going to produce a lot of shortages. Shortages in wealth, shortages in goods and services, and that means tensions will grow, and the crime rates can go up. Some armed conflicts are more likely, and that is something we should be, again, very mindful of. And lastly, the end of globalization as we know it does not mean, especially given today's telecom and travel facilities, technologies, it does not mean that the world will again be fully separated in the style of North Korea, one country from the other. That is not going to, I don't think that's how it's going to really play out. It's just that the old style capital-led globalization will be over, and national governments, some of them, will come out and place barriers for capital, barriers for technology, flow of technology, and there are going to be more tariffs. So all in all, it's going to be, and by the way, there is going to be some more travel restrictions. I already see that some European countries having abandoned the testing for inbound passengers are now introducing new testing regimes specifically for travelers coming from China. So that basically, I think this sort of things will be more frequent, more common in 2023, and of course there will be fewer visas issued, and all in all, this is the effect of this is that there will be less travel, there will be less international business, less trade, and less exchange of technology. I do not think this is really going to be great because, as I already said, this is going to be a period of debt contraction, and in this period, we are going to already experience slower economic growth, given more barriers, more difficulty for trade and business transactions. There will be even slower growth globally, and less growth means more social tension and more potential for international conflict. So I don't think that this is necessarily good, but it is what we have to deal with. All right, so this is all I have to say today. Again, this is the 1st of January 2023. I'm going to basically process it today, and I will upload it today, hopefully. And Again, you can follow me on Twitter, Telegram, even though all of those places, all of them, are blocked in China. I think the initiative to fully block access to these websites is a symptom of the last part that I was saying, that people want to put up barriers for people to have more exchange, and this is I'm seeing that not only it's not only that China is blocking, but also I think from last year, in fact, 2022, Europe began to block some free speech platforms. I think Rumble was blocked and a few others. And this is setting really bad examples. I think that we are going to experience ever more restricting internet access, and that is going to make the split from a globalized world that much easier, and the ultimate result is going to be slower economic growth, more social tensions, and more potentials for international conflict. Thanks, and have a great day.